Good morning, seventh grade remote learners. I say morning, it's morning here where I am. This is my first hour prep. But you could be watching this in the afternoon or evening, or you could be part hour watching it at 3 in the morning. I don't know. But as long as you work on this on Tuesday, that'll be good for us. It is morning here. This is my first hour prep. I don't have a class in here, so I'm alone. So I will move my mask to the side so you can see and hear me hopefully a little bit better. As you can see, we're taking Chapter 1, Section 2 notes. I told you last week, some of you may be behind because we didn't get our stuff out till Friday, but you need to take a social studies notebook. You need to have your Chapter 1, Section 1 notes written down before your Chapter 1, Section 2 notes. And then at the end of the 9 weeks, not every week, not every day, I'll collect your notebook, and it's a 100-point grade. So you do need to make sure that you are copying down these notes. Now, as far as the video that I'm making you watch today, it'll be not long enough, and it'll go too fast for you to copy down the notes as I go, which is why I'm going to attach them for you to go at your own pace, because I don't expect you to be able to copy down a whole slideshow of notes in 10 to 20 minutes, which is what the length of the video is going to be. But as I get better and as I get a more calm, less hectic, I guess, schedule, hopefully I will lengthen these videos to be more like a regular full class period. But your regular full class period is copying down the entire section of notes. Yesterday, you should have got a sheet of questions. Again, those are just to help you on your test. They're test practice questions. They are not due to me for a grade. However, I would like to see that you've done them. So if you want to take a picture with your phone, attach it to Remind, send it to my email, make a copy in Google Docs and share your copy with me. Some of you have already done that. That would be great, just so I can check to make sure, A, not only that you've done it, but B, that you've done it correctly so you don't lose points on your test just because you got an answer incorrect because I wasn't here to help you. So feel free to share those with me. Please share those with me. So we talk about in class, your notebooks need to be what we call LOL, which is not laugh out loud or lots of love like my grandma thinks it means. In social studies, it means legible, organized, and labeled. So I need to be able to read your notebook. My handwriting, as you'll soon find out, is terrible. So if it's as good as mine, you're going to be just fine. This is my 17th year. I've had 2 students ever whose handwriting was so bad, I was like, I can't read this. Organized, it needs to be in order. You should have Chapter 1, Section 1 first. You should be doing Chapter 1, Section 2 now. You should start at the top of a new page later on in your notebook, then Chapter 1, Section 3, then Chapter 2, Section 1, and so on. And then the second L is labeled. You should need to have at least Chapter 1, Section 2 at the top of your page right now. The title, City and Empire, is not necessary, but if that helps you, that's fine too. Anything else, feel free to message me, email me, inbats@cfor99.org. Send a message on Google Classroom, whatever. For attendance today, I'm going to ask a random question at some point in every YouTube video I send home. That counts as attendance. It could be something very simple, but you need to comment in Google Classroom to answer the question. This is not going to be necessarily social studies related. It's going to be to make sure that you have watched the video all the way through. So a lot of times I'll put it at the very end, but then I don't want people to just skip into the very end to see the question. So sometimes I'll stick it in the middle. So you need to watch and pay attention. So here we go. We've been talking about Native Americans in Section 1. We talked about them crossing what was a land bridge between what we now call Asia and what we now call Alaska. That was uncovered from the last ice age called Beringia. They walked over following food. It wasn't just like on a random Thursday. They're like, oh, ready, set, go. Let's go to America. It wasn't even called America yet. The idea of governments, the idea of anything like that did not exist because farming had not been invented. And so literally the only job people could have was not shoemaker, was not social studies teacher like I am, a pharmacist like my wife is. The only job was wake up and hunt and kill or gather enough food that you and your family survive. And that was the only job that anybody had. And so when they crossed into America, they were chasing buffalo, they were chasing woolly mammoth, they were chasing saber-toothed tiger. And it wasn't just, like I said, on some random weekday. This was over literally thousands of years. And so you would have one tribe after another that would slowly migrate into what we now call Alaska, down through Canada, down through what we now call the United States, which is where you Assuming you're remote learners, you could be very remote. But anyway, down through Mexico, down through South America, and so on. And so today we're going to talk about some of the great early civilizations they built. Like it said at the very end of chapter 1, section 1, things changed when farming was invented. Okay, once farming was invented, we could have stationary communities. In other words, places that stayed where they are. The city of Christopher or the village of Christopher, whatever you want to call it, Buckner, Mulkeytown, wherever you live. I live in Heron. I'm from Benton. But even Chicago, New York, the bigger cities, they all exist because we discovered farming. Because like I said just a couple minutes ago, before we discovered farming, there was no job other than go find food. But once you can have food find you, in other words, once you know that there's going to be a steady supply of food in this certain place, whether it's a field of corn, soybeans, potatoes, or whatever, that opens you up to being able to build stationary communities, which opens you up to being able to have governments, to have jobs. I mean, everything you have in your life, whether you're playing Warzone this afternoon, whether you're on Snapchat on your phone, or whatever, all that exists because we discovered farming. The idea that I'm a teacher, the idea that you are a student, the idea that your parents have whatever jobs they have, the chair that you're sitting in right now exists because of farming. Nothing really existed before we discovered farming because everybody spent their days chasing food sources. And so, as you can see here, in 1911, a guy named Hiram Bingham discovered the ancient city of what we now call Machu Picchu, which sounds like a Pokemon character, but is not. And when he discovered this really opened up our minds to the fact that these were not some uncivilized ancient peoples. These were people that were just like in Europe, building Rome and building the great cities of Paris and whatever in Europe. These people had their own civilizations that were just as advanced in different ways, but just as advanced as all the cities in Europe. And so he discovered these ancient ruins. And so the four ones we're going to talk about, and there are really three main ones, plus the Olmec. The Olmec we'll mention because they were a great civilization, but they were the first, and so that means they were the furthest back, which means we know the least about them. The Olmec is from 15 BC to 300 BC. Now, BC is before the year zero, okay? And so we measure time based on the life of Jesus Christ. And so the year zero all the way through what we now call 2020 is AD. And so before that, the year before the year one was 1 BC. There was no year zero. I know I said it just a minute ago, but you get the idea. And so when you're talking BC, the bigger the numbers, the longer ago it was. Okay, so 300 BC was 2,500 or so years ago, whereas 1500 BC was another 1,000 plus years on top of that. So the Olmec flourished. That means they grew and succeeded along the coast of what is now Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras. You're on your computer right now watching this. You're watching this on YouTube, so you have some sort of internet access. So you can go to Google Earth and you can look up where those are. But those are in, obviously, Mexico is right below or south of the United States. And Guatemala and Honduras are south of that, and they're part of the little chain. The archipelago is the name, that isthmus, actually, that connects North America and South America, at least anyway it did before we dug the Panama Canal through it. That's a later lesson. And so the Olmec were producing enough food to feed thousands of people. And so instead of having tribes of a small group of maybe just a few people, maybe a few dozen people, you were able to have cities and villages and civilizations. Okay, and so the first we're going to talk about is the Maya, and they built in what is now, same Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and Belize. They built pyramids, and at the center of their villages, they were great religious centers of their city, and their whole cities and civilizations were based spiritually around their religion, but their actual cities were literally based around these pyramids. They were in the center of the city, and the city would grow outward from there. And so these were called, and the word might actually be later on in the notes underlined, but a theocracy. A theocracy is a civilization that bases their government around whatever specific religion they ascribe to. And a lot of these ancient civilizations, they would have one lead priest who would go up to the top of the temple, and he would speak to God, whether or not, And then he would come down and say, well, I am the king. God says I'm still the king. You need to give me sacrifices of gold and stuff. And, you could be skeptical of that because they worship, probably different religions than what you do or don't. That's not my business, but that's how they base their civilization. And so they were able to grow maize, which is an early form of corn, beans, sweet potatoes, and other vegetables. And these, we talk about pyramids and you think of the ones in Egypt, the 3 great pyramids of Giza with the Sphinx without a nose. But these pyramids in what we now call Mexico and Central America were every bit of their equal. They were built out of different kinds of stone. But as you'll see here, maybe on the next slide, but maybe a couple ahead, these are incredibly large, incredibly impressive monuments that were able to be built without the aid of bulldozers, machineries, cranes, and stuff like that. This is all built with human labor. Now, sadly, it's incredible, but sadly, a lot of times when you say human labor, you're talking about slave labor, which is going to be a theme that we're going to talk about all the way through the American Civil War, which is going to come up in 8th grade. But the fact that these were able to be accomplished, took years, if not decades, if not centuries in a lot of instances. But each city, as you can see, by AD 300. Now, AD means in our time. We're in AD now. So this is 300. So 2020 minus 300, so this is 1,800 something years ago or 700 something years ago. And so they had, many large cities. As you could tell, math is not my strong point. My last math class was 1998. Each had at least one large stone pyramid. Some were 200 feet tall, 20 stories tall. If you think of the big, what's named the Wood Building, the biggest building in Benton on the square there with the bank at the bottom, that's 7 stories? So it's over twice as tall as that. And like I said a minute ago, there's that word theocracy. This is a society that's ruled by religious leaders. And so you can see right here, if you can hopefully see on the screen, these are people, okay? If you could see the arrow on my screen. So these down here, there's a cowboy hat, a couple cowboy hats down here. But you can see these are human beings, and you can see how tall for scale these pyramids are. And so the fact that we still think of these civilizations as being less than or less civilized than other ones in other parts of the world is not really true. They were able to have civilizations and cultures and architecture that rivaled anything anywhere in the world. So before we talk about the Aztec, real quick, this is your attendance question for the day. In Google Classroom, when I post this, all you need to do is answer this question just in the comments. Okay, so the question is, what's your favorite color? That's simple. And so if you go in the comments and write the word blue, I count you as present for today. If blue is not your favorite color, put your favorite color. If you don't have a favorite color, say I don't have a favorite color, make one up and lie. I won't know better. It doesn't matter. But this needs to know that you have heard this question. You are watching your video today and you are here for attendance. You're paying attention. Okay. So the Aztec, they came after the Maya a few centuries later. They were a warlike people. Their greatest city was one of the biggest cities on planet Earth at the time. It's called Tenochtitlan. And a funny story is, if you look at the Mexican flag even today, it is a cactus with an eagle sitting on it, with an eagle that has a snake in his mouth. And so their leader named Montezuma was basically wandering the Mexican countryside saying hey, I had a vision that I saw this. I saw a cactus and the eagle had a snake in his mouth. And when we find that, we will know where we're going to settle. And so they did this for decades. And finally, they saw that. They saw a cactus with an eagle on it, and an eagle had a snake in his mouth, but it was on a little island in the middle of a lake. And so Montezuma's like, this is the place. And so all his followers were like, bro, are you serious? This is a lake. And he was like, well, not for long. And so they had to literally, using buckets, fill in the lake. And it took hundreds of years, but they did it. This is where Mexico City, Mexico is today. You can still see Lake Texcoco is still there. If you, like I said, if you want to get it on Google Maps for your own education and edification, you can look at this. But they basically, through just hard work, I mean, again, a lot of this was slave labor, because as you can see on this new slide, the Aztec were a military people. And they used a lot of labor that they forced into their society, which again is a lot of ethical and moral problems. But, things were like that back then. And so they would go to surrounding areas and they would conquer their civilizations, and they would force them into military service for them. They were also a theocracy. Once white settlers, Europeans, got here, they were unbelievably blown away by Tenochtitlan and the Aztec Empire. We'll talk more about that in Chapter 2. As you see, they were in Christopher Columbus and Hernan Cortez and the conquistadors, Magellan, and all these guys start exploring. That's our Chapter 2 lesson. So I won't talk much about that now because we're already 15 minutes in, and that's coming on later on. Okay, so the Aztecs is the second one, and then you, of course, have the Inca. Their biggest city was Cuzco. They were the most recent of these 3 or 4, if you count the Olmec. They had more than 9 million people. The city of New York City has about 8 million people, for example. So we're talking about a very huge civilization. You know, the whole state of Illinois has like 12.2 million. And so they had almost as many people as the entire state of Illinois. And so they had roads, they had farms, they were famous for settling in mountainous areas, which if you've ever tried farming, you know that mountains are not good for farming. You drop a seed, it goes, "Wah." And so what they did is they cut literally, again, using man-made tools and labor. They didn't have jackhammers, they didn't have cranes, they didn't have bulldozers. They used only manpower and tools that they created with their own hands. It was incredible. They were able to cut terraces, like, in other words, large steps into the side of mountains. And I'll show you a picture here in a second, to be able to grow. And this, again, is one of the greatest engineering feats of all time. And so you can see here what the terraces look like. So we are 16 minutes in. That is all the notes we have today. Like I said, I do not expect you to be able to write these down entirely as I'm talking, which is why I attach these also so you could write these down at your own pace. But you do need to watch the YouTube video at some point. Check in with me on Google Classroom and answer the question, what's your favorite color? Just in the comments, just so I know that you showed up to social studies today, you have paid attention to the video, and you're here. So hopefully I will talk to you soon, or see you soon, or you'll definitely see me in the tiny little circle corner with my giant head and beard. But keep wearing your mask when you're out in public, keep washing your hands, and stay safe, and have a good rest of your Tuesday. Bye-bye.